Emily Parker had grown used to quiet winters. After her divorce 2 years ago, her house in Vermont felt too still, especially during the holidays. She tried to fill the silence with small routines: warm tea in the afternoon, soft music in the evenings, long pauses where she stared outside at the falling snow. Life wasn't terrible, but it felt paused, like she was living inside a moment that refused to move forward. She didn't talk about it, not even to her friends. She simply told herself this was what healing looked like, even though deep down she knew she was lonely. On one cold afternoon, when the sky was turning grey and the wind was brushing against the windows, Emily heard her doorbell ring. The sound startled her because no one ever came without calling. She pulled her sweater tighter around her and opened the door, and froze in shock. Her son, Daniel, stood there with a suitcase and the biggest smile she had seen on him in months. "Mum," he said, slightly out of breath from the cold. "Surprise." Emily covered her mouth with her hand before pulling him into a tight hug. Daniel worked in New York and rarely came home because of his busy schedule. She had accepted it, telling herself he was building his life. But seeing him at her doorstep without warning felt like a piece of her heart suddenly waking up. Inside, Daniel placed his suitcase near the couch and warmed his hands by the heater. Emily kept looking at him as if afraid he would disappear. The last few years had taught her not to expect too much from moments that felt good. But Daniel seemed different today, focused, thoughtful, watching her in a way he hadn't in a long time. "Mom," he said gently, "I didn't just come to spend the holidays. I came because I think you need something more." Emily frowned slightly, not understanding. She had expected him to bring stories from the city or news about his work, not something so serious. Daniel reached into his jacket and took out a small envelope. He placed it in her hands, giving her a soft, hopeful smile. "Open it." Her fingers trembled a little as she slid out the paper inside. Her eyes widened. It was a reservation, a full week-long vacation in California, at a peaceful oceanfront hotel. The start date was only a few days away. She looked up at him, confused. "Daniel, what is this?" "It's for you," he said. "A break. A reset. A chance to breathe again." Emily shook her head. She hadn't taken a trip since her divorce. Traveling alone felt strange, almost wrong, like she wasn't someone who got to have escapes or new scenery. She had spent so much time holding her life together after the marriage ended that she forgot about everything else. "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice the way he used to when he was trying to tell her something important. "Because you've been living on pause, Mom. I see it. Even when you say you're fine. You look tired. You look stuck. And you don't deserve to feel this way." Emily blinked, surprised by how accurately he had read her. She tried to say she didn't need a vacation, but the truth sat too close to her chest to deny. She was tired. She was stuck. And she missed feeling alive. Daniel continued. "I want you to live again. To feel something good again. You took care of me all these years. Let me take care of you now." His voice didn't sound dramatic, it sounded sincere, like a son who finally saw the quiet pain his mother carried. Emily held the reservation paper tightly. The thought of warm beaches, soft sunsets, and fresh air felt far away, almost unreal. She wasn't the woman who took spontaneous vacations. She used to be, years ago, before responsibilities and heartbreak reshaped her life. "Daniel, California is so far," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied gently. "That's the point." She let out a soft breath. He watched her carefully, waiting for her answer, but she wasn't ready to give one. Instead, she walked to the window and stared out at the snow-covered street. The world outside looked frozen, motionless, stuck in the same cold pattern she felt inside. Maybe change was exactly what she needed. Daniel approached her slowly. Ma'am, just try. Go for a week. You don't have to be brave. Just pack a bag and let the world feel new for a few days. Emily's eyes softened. There was something bright in his expression, hope mixed with concern. He wasn't pushing her toward adventure. He was trying to pull her out of a loneliness he didn't know how else to fix. She finally nodded, though it was small and uncertain. All right, she whispered. I'll go. Daniel let out a relieved laugh and hugged her tight. She felt the warmth of his arms and realized she had missed being held like that, safe, cared for, seen. But as she stood there, holding the reservation, she felt something else too, a strange flutter of nervous excitement. She had no idea what awaited her in California. She didn't know that this trip would bring someone into her life she had never expected. She didn't know her story was about to turn. All she knew was that her son had given her a chance. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted to take it. Emily arrived in California with a mix of nerves and hope. The warm air touched her skin the moment she stepped out of the airport, and it felt like a gentle reminder that not every season of life had to be cold. Her hotel was right by the ocean, with long windows that opened to the sound of steady waves. She hadn't heard the ocean in years, and the sound alone made her feel lighter. On her second morning, she decided to walk along the beach. The sun was rising, the sky brushed with soft orange, and the sand felt warm even though the day had just begun. She didn't plan where to go. She let her feet follow the shoreline, her mind drifting between old memories and the unexpected freedom of being somewhere new. As she walked, she noticed a man standing near the water, staring at the horizon. He looked calm yet troubled, like someone who carried thoughts too heavy to share. He was a little older than her, maybe early 50s, with graying hair, in a steady posture. There was something quiet about him, something that matched the peaceful rhythm of the waves. Emily tried to walk past without disturbing him, but as he stepped back from the tide, he accidentally moved right into her path. They both stopped. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said quickly. His voice was warm, gentle. "I didn't see you." "It's all right," Emily replied with a small smile. "The ocean can do that. It pulls you in." He chuckled softly and nodded. "That it does." He paused for a second before adding, "I'm Michael. Michael Turner." "Emily." For a moment they simply stood there, the breeze moving around them, the waves washing close to their feet. Emily didn't usually talk to strangers, especially not men, but there was nothing uncomfortable about his presence. He didn't seem like someone trying to start something. He looked more like someone who needed company without admitting it. They began walking in the same direction, not exactly together, but close enough that conversation felt natural. Michael mentioned he lived in a small house near the beach. He wasn't on vacation. This was his everyday view. Emily told him she was visiting for the first time, that her son had arranged the trip. When she mentioned her divorce, she didn't go into details, and he didn't ask for any. He just nodded with quiet understanding. Michael spoke softly, like a person who didn't want to disturb the morning air. He shared that his wife had passed away a few years ago, and that since then, he often came to the beach to think. "The waves help," he said. "They remind me that life keeps going, even when you feel stuck." Emily felt a small pinch in her chest. She understood that feeling too well. As they continued walking, they reached a small cafe by the pier, its windows open and filled with the smell of fresh coffee. Michael pointed toward it with a polite smile. "If you want, we could sit for a cup. No pressure. It's just nice to talk to someone new." Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to trusting new people, especially after everything she had been through. But he didn't look like someone who wanted anything more than simple conversation. And she realized she hadn't sat with someone, really sat and talked, since long before her divorce. She agreed. They found a table by the window where the ocean stretched out like a painting. The cafe was quiet, soft music playing in the background, and for a moment Emily wondered when she had last been in a place that felt this peaceful. Their conversation flowed easily. Michael talked about how he spent his evenings walking along the shore because the sunsets helped him feel connected to the world again. Emily talked about Vermont, the cold winters, her son's long work hours, and how she had almost forgotten what warmth felt like. Not just warmth in the weather, but in her own heart. Michael listened with an attentiveness that surprised her. He wasn't distracted or impatient. He looked at her like her words mattered, like he understood the pieces of pain that she kept tucked away. At one point, he said quietly, "You don't seem like someone who gives herself enough credit. You've been through a lot, Emily. You deserve peace." The sincerity in his voice made her look down for a moment. She wasn't used to kindness that came without expectation. It made her chest feel strangely full. They were mid-conversation when Michael's phone rang. He checked the screen, and Emily saw his expression change slightly. His brow tightened. His posture stiffened. He excused himself and stepped outside, answering in a low voice. Emily watched him through the window, noticing the way his shoulders dropped as he listened. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but she could feel it. When he returned, he placed his phone on the table and tried to smile, but the heaviness hadn't left his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I have to go. My daughter, she needs me." Emily nodded gently. "Of course. Family comes first." He held her gaze for a moment longer. Something unspoken hanging in the air, something warm, unexpected, and fragile. "I enjoyed talking with you," he said. "More than I expected." "Me too," she admitted quietly. He stood, hesitated again, then added, "Maybe I'll see you around." And then he left, the door chiming softly behind him. Emily stayed at the table a little longer, staring at the waves as they crashed and retreated, over and over. Something inside her felt different, lighter and heavier at the same time. She hadn't come to California looking for anything. Yet somehow, she had stumbled into a moment that felt like the beginning of something she didn't understand. As she walked back to her hotel, the only thing she knew for sure was that she hoped she would see him again. Emily spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about her unexpected meeting with Michael. She hadn't planned to feel anything on this trip, not curiosity, not warmth, and definitely not a quiet ache when he walked out of the cafe. She reminded herself it was just a conversation with a stranger, but her heart didn't agree. Something about him stayed with her long after he left. That evening, she sat on the balcony of her hotel, watching the sky turn gold, then pink, then deep purple. California sunsets felt different, bolder, warmer, like they carried a promise of something new. She held her cup of tea close, trying to settle the swirl of thoughts in her mind. She should have been relaxing, enjoying the vacation her son gave her. But instead she kept replaying the sound of Michael's voice, the worry in his eyes when he said his daughter needed him. She didn't know why she cared so much. She barely knew him. But something about his quiet strength, the way he spoke with honesty instead of charm, made her feel drawn to him in a way she hadn't felt in years. Just as she leaned back in her chair, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Thank you for today, Michael." Emily stared at the screen for a long moment. The message was simple, but it hit her unexpectedly deep. He hadn't needed to reach out, yet he did. And that meant something. She typed back slowly, "I hope everything is all right with your daughter." She didn't expect an answer, but after a few minutes her phone lit up again. "It will be. Some days are harder, but we manage. Talking with you helped more than you know." Emily held the phone close to her chest for a moment, surprised by how much those words warmed her. She wanted to ask more, what his daughter was struggling with, Why he looked so heavy today, but she didn't want to cross a line. They were strangers who just happened to share a peaceful morning. She couldn't pretend they were anything more. Still that night, she fell asleep thinking of him. The next morning, Emily woke early, restless but hopeful. She didn't expect to see him again, but she found herself walking the same path on the beach anyway. The waves were quieter today, the wind soft, and the sand cool under her feet. She kept her eyes on the water, trying not to look around too much, trying not to hope for something she didn't understand. And yet she stopped suddenly. Michael was there. He stood by the shore, hands in his pockets, looking as if he'd been waiting for someone. When he saw her, relief washed over his face. "Emily," he said, almost breathless, as if he wasn't sure she would come back. She walked toward him, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," he said, though his voice carried a hint of exhaustion. "My daughter had a difficult day yesterday. She's struggling with some personal things. I didn't want to explain too much, but I didn't want to disappear without saying anything either." Emily nodded, feeling that same soft ache again. She didn't push him to share more. She simply said, "I'm glad she's all right." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm also glad you're here." They began walking again, this time closer than before. Their conversation flowed naturally, but now there was something deeper under the surface. An understanding. A quiet comfort that came from knowing they were both people who had loved, lost, and kept going even when the world felt heavy. Michael admitted something he hadn't told anyone in a long time. "When my wife passed, I closed off. I didn't mean to, but life became something I just went through, not something I felt. Yesterday, talking to you, I felt something shift. It scared me a little." Emily listened, her steps slowing. She knew what he meant. After her divorce, she had built thick walls around her heart, convinced herself that her days of feeling deeply were over. Yet here she was, walking beside a man she barely knew, and her heart felt awake for the first time in years. "Sometimes the heart wakes up before the mind is ready," she said softly. Michael smiled, small, grateful. "Exactly." They reached the pier and stopped near the railing, the ocean stretching wide in front of them. The morning sun touched their faces, warm and gentle. Michael rested his hands on the railing, looking out at the waves. "I don't want to move too fast," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to pretend yesterday didn't mean something." Emily felt her breath catch. She wasn't used to honesty like this, not from a man, not from anyone. She looked at him, letting the truth she felt settle in her chest. "It meant something to me too," she whispered. The air between them grew warmer, heavier in a comfortable way. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The connection forming between them was gentler than touch, deeper than words, and built on something simple and real. Then Michael turned toward her. "I'd like to see you again, if you want." Emily didn't hesitate this time. "I do." For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what came. Next, she was curious, hopeful, and alive. The rest of the week passed faster than Emily expected. Each day felt like a quiet chapter she hadn't planned to write. She and Michael met almost every morning, sometimes for a walk, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to sit by the ocean in silence. They didn't rush anything. They didn't pretend they were anything more than two people learning how to breathe again after years of carrying too much. Still, something warm grew between them, gentle but noticeable. On the fourth day, Michael invited her to see the cliffs at sunset. He said the view helped him feel grounded, like he could remember the good things without drowning in the past. Emily agreed, curious and excited in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. They drove up in his old truck, the windows down, the wind brushing through her hair. The sun was slowly lowering itself toward the horizon, turning the world shades of gold and red. When they reached the top, the sky looked almost unreal. Emily stepped out and felt the breeze lift her breath. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Michael walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his eyes on the ocean below. "I come here when life feels heavy," he said. "Somehow, it reminds me that endings don't mean everything stops. Sometimes they make space for something new." Emily glanced at him, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The wind moved between them like a quiet reminder of how strange and wonderful this connection was. They found a place to sit near the edge, close enough to feel the drop but far enough to feel safe. Michael told her stories about his daughter, how she was fighting through her own heartbreak, trying to rebuild her confidence after a difficult relationship. Emily listened with empathy. She could hear the love in his voice, the worry, the hope. She admired the way he cared, the way he tried to hold everything together for the people he loved. Then he turned to her gently. "You remind me that people can heal, Emily. You don't even know it, but you do." His words caught her off guard. She looked down at her hands, then back at the ocean. "I'm still healing too." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I trust you." The sky brightened in orange streaks and the waves crashed far below, steady and endless. Emily felt something inside her loosen, as if the last pieces of her old grief were finally stepping back. When the sun dipped halfway into the horizon, Michael took a slow breath. "I don't want to ruin what we have by pushing too much. But I also don't want to pretend this hasn't changed me." Emily felt her heart beat faster. She waited. "Meeting you," he continued. "It felt like someone opened a window in a room I thought would stay dark forever." He wasn't dramatic. He was honest. And that honesty made her chest tighten in the softest way. Emily looked into his eyes. Really looked and saw the truth of what he was saying. The loneliness he carried. The courage it took to open up again. And the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, the world was offering him another chance. "I feel the same," she whispered. The breeze grew cooler as the sun sank lower. They didn't lean closer or reach for each other. They simply sat with the truth of their feelings, letting it settle between them in a way that felt safe and natural. After a long pause, Michael asked, "How long are you staying?" 2 more days, she said. "Then I go back to Vermont." He nodded, his expression sad but accepting. "I don't want this to end when you leave." Emily felt a soft ache. She didn't want it to end either, but she also knew life didn't tie itself neatly around beautiful moments. "I don't want it to end," she said gently. "But we both have our lives. We don't know what distance will do." "We don't," he agreed. "But maybe we don't need to know everything right now." She breathed in slowly, letting his words settle. Maybe life didn't need certainty. Maybe it only needed courage for the next step. They stayed on the cliff until the sun disappeared completely, leaving only the faint glow of twilight behind. Then they walked back to the truck, slow and thoughtful. On the ride back, the air felt different, quieter, deeper. Emily let her hand rest on the door, watching the lights of the coastline pass by. She didn't know the future, but she knew this week had changed